the speculator who has never been wiped out, who has never been forced to confront the abyss of his own failure, is a speculator who has not yet completed his education. For in this business, ruin is the great and unforgiving teacher. To be reduced to zero is not in itself a mark of failure. It is a rite of passage, a common and often necessary experience in the life of any man who dares to engage with the market on a serious level. The true test of a speculator's character is not whether he can avoid being knocked down, but whether he has the fortitude, the intelligence, and the courage to get back up. This is a clinical analysis of that very process. It is a deep dissection of the art of starting over, of the science of the comeback. And there is no greater case study in this art than the life of Jesse Livermore, a man who repeatedly climbed to the highest peaks of Wall Street, was cast down into the deepest valleys of ruin, and who, time and again, found the strength to begin the long, hard climb back to the top. His story is a testament to a profound and often overlooked truth, that losing everything is not the end of the game, but an opportunity to begin again, wiser and stronger than before. It is a lesson in the fact that a speculator's greatest asset is not his capital, but his knowledge of himself and of his own mistakes. The principles that guided his comebacks were not complex or secret. They were the simple, hard-won truths of the market, the very rules he had often violated to bring about his own downfall. His journey is the ultimate chronicle of failure and redemption. The foundational text for understanding this entire philosophy, the very soul of his operational thinking, was masterfully documented by Edwin Lefebvre. A link to his essential work, Reminiscences of a Stock Operator, now with a unique detailed chapter-by-chapter analysis from Max Davidson, is left in the description below this video. This analysis is specially designed to make the timeless wisdom of the book accessible and powerfully relevant to the modern reader. The first of Livermore's great descents into the abyss was a lesson in the dangers of an untested system. He had begun his career as a boy genius, the boy plunger of the Boston bucket shops. In that simple, fast-moving environment, his method of pure tape reading was infallible. He had solved the game. He came to New York with a well-earned stake and an even greater supply of confidence, believing he could apply his bucket shop methods to the New York Stock Exchange with the same spectacular results. He could not. The conditions of the game were fundamentally different. The ticker was delayed. Executions were not instantaneous. The scale of the capital was vastly larger. His old system, so perfect for its original environment, was a useless and broken tool in this new, more complex arena. The market, in its impersonal way, proceeded to teach him this lesson. He was wiped out completely. His capital, the fruit of years of successful operation, was gone. This was his first experience of starting from zero. He was forced to borrow a small stake from a friend just to get by. The lesson was a profound one. A method is only as good as the conditions in which it operates. A speculator must be a student of changing conditions, and he must have the intellectual flexibility to adapt his methods accordingly. His first ruin was the price he paid for his own youthful rigidity. His second great downfall was far more complex and far more instructive. It was a ruin born not of inexperience, but of its opposite, the supreme arrogance and emotional recklessness that can follow a massive historic success. In the Great Panic of 1907, Livermore had cemented his legend. He had correctly anticipated the crash and, by selling the market short, had accumulated a fortune of several $1 million. He was the great bear of Wall Street, a man who had looked into the financial abyss and had emerged a king. It was this very success that laid the foundation for his next failure. A man who has just made a great fortune is in the most dangerous psychological state a speculator can experience. He begins to feel infallible. His respect for the market's inherent risk diminishes. He forgets that he is a student of the market and begins to see himself as its master. This hubris led him to the cotton market, where he intended to become the cotton king. He built a massive, dangerously large position, a line so great that it dwarfed even his most ambitious trades of the past. He was no longer speculating with caution. He was betting with the reckless abandon of a man who believed he could not lose. And crucially, he had allowed his judgment to be influenced by another man, a charismatic cotton expert named Percy Thomas. He had violated his own cardinal rule of relying only on his own study of the tape. When the cotton market began to turn against him, the tape gave him a clear and unambiguous signal to sell. A small loss at this point would have been a minor setback, but his ego and his loyalty to Thomas's bullish vision would not allow it. He held on. He began to hope. He was trapped by the psychological pressure of his own massive position. He was no longer thinking about preserving his capital. He was thinking only about being proven right. He wanted to win it back. This desire to win it back, to recoup a loss by pressing a bad bet, is one of the most powerful and destructive of all the emotional traps. It is a state of mind in which all scientific principles of speculation are abandoned in favor of a gambler's desperate hope. He not only held his losing position, he began to average down, throwing good money after bad, convinced that he could force the market to bend to his will. The result was a catastrophe. The cotton market collapsed, and he was wiped out once more, this time on a monumental scale. He lost his entire multi-million-dollar fortune and was plunged deep into debt. His second great start from zero was upon him. This failure was far more painful than the first, for it was not a result of ignorance, but a result of a willful and arrogant violation of the very rules he knew to be true. It is in the aftermath of such a devastating, self-inflicted loss that a man's character is truly tested. It is easy and it is common to blame the market, to blame bad luck, or to blame the advice of others. The amateur always finds an external cause for his failure. Livermore did not do this. This was the first and most important principle of his ability to recover. He never blamed the market. He knew the market was an impersonal force. He knew there was only one person responsible for his ruin, himself. This act of taking absolute personal responsibility is the cornerstone of all learning in speculation. A man who blames others for his mistakes is a man who is doomed to repeat them, for he has not learned the lesson. A man who blames himself is a man who has the power to diagnose his error and to ensure it never happens again. And so, in the quiet, painful years of his second financial exile, he began the hard work of self-analysis. He pored over his records. He dissected the cotton campaign, tracing his failure back to its root cause, his own ego, his own hope, and his decision to trust another man's opinion over the facts of the tape. He began the practical steps of recovery. He drastically reduced his personal expenses, a lesson in humility and respect for capital. He was forced to borrow a new, much smaller stake, a process that required him to swallow his immense pride. He was starting over, not as a king, but as a humble student once more. He had learned that the market does not forgive a lack of discipline. It does not care about a man's past successes. Each day is a new test, and the rules are always the same. His second ruin had forged these rules into his very soul. Another start-from-zero moment came not from a trading loss, but from an external event of historic proportions. The closure of the New York Stock Exchange in 1914 at the outbreak of the Great War. In the chaotic days leading up to the shutdown, the market was a whipsaw of rumors and fears. The amateur was gambling on the headlines, losing his capital on wild guesses about the political future. Livermore, having learned his lessons, largely stood aside. He saw that the conditions were not clear, that the tape was not telling a definite story, and in the absence of a clear signal, his rule was to do nothing. He was in cash, his capital preserved. The shutdown, which trapped and ruined countless other traders, left him unharmed, but it also left him, like everyone else, at a form of zero. He was a speculator with no market to speculate in. He was a great general with no battlefield. He did not, however, waste this time in idle frustration. He used the months of the closure for deep study and analysis. He knew that the war would fundamentally reshape the world and the market. he prepared his mind for the new game that would emerge when the exchange reopened. This period of forced inactivity was a powerful lesson in the strategic value of patience. Sometimes the most profitable thing a man can do is nothing at all. He must use the quiet times to study, to think, and to prepare for the next great, clear opportunity. The final and most tragic downfall came after his single greatest success. By applying all of his mature, hard-won principles, he correctly anticipated the great crash of 1929, and by shorting the market, accumulated his largest fortune, estimated at $100 million. He had reached the absolute pinnacle. He had conquered the game in a way no man had ever done before. And it was from this great height that his final, slow, and irreversible descent began. This last failure was not the result of a single bad trade or a single violation of his rules. It was a slow, grinding disintegration of the man himself. The reasons were complex and deeply personal. His private life was in turmoil. He went through a series of difficult and costly divorces. He was beset by personal tragedies that would have broken any man. The immense, almost unimaginable pressure of managing such a vast fortune began to take its toll. The market, too, was changing. The creation of the SEC and new government regulations had altered the freewheeling game that he had mastered. The old rules of manipulation and pool operations no longer applied in the same way. But the ultimate cause of his final downfall was a form of mental and spiritual exhaustion. The great game of speculation, when played at the highest level, is a marathon of immense psychological pressure. It is a constant battle against the powerful elemental forces of one's own human nature. After nearly 40 years of this intense, non-stop warfare, a man's mental and emotional capital can become depleted. His nerve, his confidence, his very will to continue the fight can begin to erode. He began to make uncharacteristic mistakes. He invested in ventures outside his field of expertise. He lost his legendary feel for the tape. The clear, cold, objective mind of the master speculator became clouded by the fog of his own inner turmoil. By the mid-1930s, he was, for the third and final time, bankrupt. This time there was to be no comeback. The man was older, the market was different, and his own inner fire had been extinguished. What, then, is the ultimate lesson from this cycle of ruin and rebirth? It is that the game of speculation is, first and foremost, a test of character. It is a man's own weaknesses, his own emotional and psychological flaws, that are his greatest and most persistent enemy. Livermore proved that any man can lose his capital. It is a part of the game. The true mark of a speculator is not his ability to avoid these losses, but his ability to endure them, to learn from them, and to begin again. To start from zero is not a disgrace. It is an opportunity. It is a chance to shed the old bad habits, to correct the flawed thinking, and to begin a new campaign with a clean slate and the invaluable wisdom that has been paid for with the price of defeat. The market is a great marathon, not a sprint. The man who is at the bottom today can, with the right application of principles, be at the top tomorrow. The market is always there, always offering new opportunities. The final and most important question is not whether a speculator will fall. He will. The question is whether he has the character to use the hard rock of his own failures as the foundation upon which he will build his next and greatest victory. The first, most difficult and most essential step on the long road back from zero is, therefore, a profound and unflinching act of self-analysis. The speculator must look into the unflinching mirror of his own results and say, with absolute conviction, "The market was not wrong. My judgment was wrong." He must understand that the market is an impersonal and infallible machine. It registers the facts of supply and demand. It has no opinion, no malice, and no favorites. A loss is not a punishment inflicted by the market. It is the market's impartial verdict on a flawed speculative opinion. By accepting this responsibility, the speculator takes the first step in reclaiming his power. He moves from the position of a helpless victim to that of a scientist who has just witnessed a failed experiment. His task now is not to curse the laws of nature, but to analyze his procedure to discover the source of his error. He must recognize that his loss was the result of a specific mistake, a violation of a sound principle of speculation. Perhaps he was ignorant of the principle. Perhaps he knew it, but was too weak in character to follow it. The reason does not matter. The fault is his and his alone. This act of taking responsibility is a painful one. It is a blow to the ego. But it is the necessary and cleansing fire through which every man must pass before he can be reborn as a true professional. Until a man can look at his own foolishness without flinching, he is not ready to return to the game. With the correct mental foundation now laid, the second step is a practical and immediate one, the ruthless protection of what little capital remains. A speculator's capital is his lifeblood. It is his ammunition, his inventory, the tool of his trade. Without it, he is out of the business. The man who has suffered a great loss must immediately and drastically reduce his personal expenditures. He must abandon the lifestyle of the successful speculator he once was and adopt the frugal habits of a man who is starting over. He must treat every remaining dollar with a kind of sacred reverence. He cannot afford to waste a single cent on non-essentials. The desire to keep up appearances is a form of ego that a broken speculator cannot afford. His one and only focus must be the preservation of his speculative ammunition. A man with a single dollar in his pocket is still a speculator. A man with zero is a former speculator. This period of forced frugality is a powerful and necessary form of discipline. It is a constant daily reminder of the cost of his past mistakes. It rebuilds his respect for money, a respect that was likely lost during the heady days of his previous success. It is a humbling process, but it is the foundation of a sounder and more permanent future success. The man who has learned to live on little is a man who is no longer a slave to the need for constant profits. He can afford to be patient. The third step is to forge a new and unbreakable constitution for his future operations. Before he makes another trade, he must establish a set of definite and inviolable rules for the management of his risk. He has just learned in the most brutal way possible what happens to the man who trades without such rules. He must determine in the cold light of reason the absolute maximum percentage of his total capital that he is willing to risk on any single speculative idea. This figure should be a small one, perhaps no more than 1 or 2% of his total stake. This is his insurance premium against his own fallibility. It is the mathematical guarantee that no single error in judgment can ever again have the power to wipe him out. He must then recommit himself to the ironclad rule of the stop-loss. He must decide, based on his reading of the tape and the character of the stock, exactly where his opinion is proven wrong, and he must place his stop-loss at that point with the unwavering resolve to honor it without question or hesitation. These rules, once established, are not mere suggestions. They are the supreme law of his new business. To violate them even once is to begin the journey back to ruin. The fourth step is the return to the market itself. But this return must be a cautious, humble, and scientific one. The speculator who has been broken cannot return with the same bold and aggressive posture he once had. His nerve has been shaken, and his confidence must be rebuilt, slowly and carefully. Therefore, he must begin with a small stake. His first trades upon his return should be for a deliberately and almost absurdly small number of shares. The purpose of these initial trades is not to make a great deal of money. The purpose is twofold. First, it is to test his reforged discipline. Can he follow his new rules under the pressure of a real market? Can he cut a small loss without hesitation? Can he sit with a small profit without fear? Second, it is to rebuild his confidence. A series of small, successful trades executed perfectly according to his plan will do more to heal a broken nerve than any amount of abstract study. It is the proof to his own mind that he has learned his lesson and is once again capable of operating correctly. To return to the market with a large position, under the pressure of needing to make a big score, is a fatal error. It invites the old emotional demons of fear and greed back into the game. The comeback must begin small, with the single patient goal of trading correctly, not of trading for a profit. This leads directly to the fifth and most psychologically difficult step: the absolute and total conquest of the urge to win it back quickly. This is the great enemy of the comeback. It is the gambler's instinct, the desperate desire to erase the memory of the great loss with a single, heroic, and spectacularly profitable trade. This urge is born of a wounded ego. It is a desire not for money, but for redemption. The speculator feels that he must prove to the market and to himself that his last failure was a fluke, that he is still the master of the game. This is a dangerous and self-destructive state of mind. The market does not care about a man's need for redemption. It is an impersonal machine. The path back from zero is not a sprint. It is a long, slow, and methodical marathon. It is a journey of 1,000 small, correct steps. The speculator must, as a matter of conscious discipline, completely abandon the thought of his past losses. He must treat his new, small stake as if it were his first and only stake. His goal is not to make back the 1,000,000 he lost, but to correctly manage the 1,000 he now has. If he can do this, if he can focus only on the present and on the perfect execution of his sound principles, the profits will, in time, take care of themselves. The man who tries to get rich quick for the second time is a man who is destined to get broke for the second time. The sixth step in the process of rebirth is the transformation of failure into education. The amateur repeats his mistakes. The professional learns from them. The speculator who has been wiped out must become a ruthless and objective student of his own past folions. He must keep a detailed journal, a logbook of his trades, particularly his losing trades. He must perform an honest and unflinching autopsy on each one. He must ask, what was my original premise? At what point was it proven wrong? Why did I fail to act on that evidence? Was the mistake a result of ignorance, a flaw in his analysis? Or was it a result of weakness, a violation of a rule he knew to be correct? He must be brutally honest with himself. A loss that does not result in the creation of a new written-down rule or the reinforcement of an old one is a completely wasted loss. It is a tuition fee paid to the market for an education that the student has refused to receive. The professional speculator uses the painful memory of his losses as the foundation upon which he builds his future victories. The seventh step is the re-enthronement of the one quality that makes all the others possible. It is the master principle of the professional speculator's mind. It is the habit of maintaining absolute discipline over one's own emotions. The great battle of speculation is not fought against the market, but against the powerful, primal, and often destructive human instincts of hope, fear, and greed. A man who is a slave to these emotions is a man who can never hope to succeed. Discipline is the only weapon that can conquer these internal enemies. It is not a feeling. It is a conscious and willed act. It is the act of subordinating one's own emotional impulses to a predetermined, logical, and proven system of rules. The speculator who is starting from zero must be a fanatic for discipline. He knows from the painful evidence of his own empty pockets what happens when discipline is allowed to lapse. His new career must be a monument to this one, great saving virtue. It is in this moment of accepting a loss that a trader's discipline is most severely tested. The pain of being wrong can be immense. It is for this reason that a constant study of these principles is not a luxury, but a necessity for survival. A return to this channel, to this video and others, especially after a series of unsuccessful trades, serves as a vital recalibration of the professional mindset. The eighth and final step of the comeback plan is the cultivation of the great virtue of patience. This is the discipline of trading only when there is a clear and definite advantage, when the market's own action aligns perfectly with one's own strategic principles. The amateur, and especially the amateur who is trying to win back a loss, is desperate for action. He will trade on minor fluctuations, on weak signals, on pure hope. He is impatient, and the market will punish his impatience. The professional speculator, the man who is rebuilding his fortune from zero, knows that he cannot afford to be impatient. His capital is too precious. He must wait, with the calm vigilance of a sniper, for the one, perfect high-probability opportunity to present itself. He knows that such opportunities are rare. He may have to sit in cash for weeks or even months watching the market, studying the tape, and doing nothing at all. This period of inaction is the most difficult and the most profitable work he does. He trades only when the line of least resistance is clear, when a leading stock has reached its pivotal point, when the volume is confirming the move, and when the general market is in harmony. He trades only when the probabilities are overwhelmingly stacked in his favor. This, then, is the complete blueprint for a comeback. It is the method for starting from zero. It begins not with a market tip, but with an act of profound self-analysis and the acceptance of personal responsibility. It continues with the practical defensive acts of protecting one's capital, cutting one's expenses, and defining one's rules of risk. It then moves to the cautious, humble, and scientific re-entry into the market, starting with a small stake, with the sole purpose of rebuilding confidence and testing one's own reforged discipline. It requires the absolute conquest of the gambler's urge to win it all back at once, and its replacement with the professional's patient, methodical, one-step-at-a-time approach. It demands that every past mistake be transformed into a future lesson, that the speculator become a ruthless student of his own failures. And it culminates in a state of mind that is the hallmark of the master, a mind that is ruled by discipline, not emotion, and a method that is based on patience, not on a constant need for action. The journey from zero is the most difficult a speculator can ever make, but it is also the most educational. The man who has been broken by the market and has had the character to rebuild himself according to these sound principles is a man who will not easily be broken again. He has been through the fire and he has emerged as tempered steel. He knows himself, he knows his enemy, and he knows the rules of the game. He is at last a true professional.